My wife stepped out of the closet wearing a tight, semi-sheer dress with absolutely nothing underneath. It was a statement, not an outfit. When I asked her where she was going dressed like that, she didn't just answer me, she smirked. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "What if I told you I'm meeting 2 of my exes tonight?" I took a step toward her, and she cut me off with a challenge that would ruin her life. "What are you gonna do about it?" She expected me to scream. She expected me to fight. But I didn't say a single word. I just picked up my phone and made one call. And that one call changed everything. Welcome back to Inspiration Seeker. If you enjoy stories about swift justice, betrayal, and the kind of karma that hits hard, make sure to hit that subscribe button, like this video, and comment, "I'm listening," down below. Trust me, you don't want to miss how this night ends. I was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows of our Upper East Side penthouse, looking out at the New York City skyline. The city lights usually calmed me down, but tonight, the air in the room felt heavy, charged with a static electricity that had nothing to do with the coming storm outside. I heard the click of heels on the marble floor behind me. That was my cue to turn around. There stood Pamela. She had spent the last 2 hours getting ready, and the result was calculated to inflict maximum damage. The dress she wore was an emerald green fabric that clung to her skin like a second layer, translucent enough to leave zero doubt that she was entirely naked beneath it. In the early years of our marriage, a sight like that would have been a gift. Tonight, it was a weapon. I took a sip of my scotch, keeping my face completely neutral. "You're going out?" I asked, my voice steady. "It's a Tuesday, Pamela." She adjusted her earring, watching my reflection in the vanity mirror. "Don't wait up, Arthur," she said, her tone dripping with boredom. "I'm meeting up with some old friends. You remember Jack and Bruce, right?" My grip tightened slightly on the glass. I knew exactly who they were. Jack was the Wall Street broker she dated before me, and Bruce was the fitness instructor she swore she had cut ties with years ago. She was practically dangling her infidelity in front of my face, daring me to snap. She wanted the angry, jealous husband routine. She wanted a reason to call me controlling so she could play the victim to her friends later. 2 ex-boyfriends at the same time? I asked, raising an eyebrow. That's a bold itinerary. She turned to face me fully, that cruel smirk playing on her lips. "What if I am? What are you gonna do about it, Arthur? You're always too busy with your mergers and acquisitions to care about what I need." The silence that followed was deafening. She stood there, chest heaving slightly, waiting for the explosion. But I had learned a long time ago that in business, and apparently in marriage, the person who loses their temper first loses the deal. I didn't shout. I didn't throw my glass. Instead, I calmly reached into my suit pocket and pulled out my phone. I unlocked it and dialed a number I had on speed dial. It rang once. "Peter," I said into the receiver, my eyes locked on Pamela's confused face. "It's Arthur. Execute Order 66. I hung up and slid the phone back into my pocket. Pamela let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "Order 66? What is that, some Star Wars nerd thing? You are pathetic, Arthur." She grabbed her clutch, shook her head in disgust, and walked out the door, the elevator chiming to announce her departure. She thought I was bluffing. She thought I was just a passive workaholic playing make-believe games. As the elevator doors slid shut, sealing her fate, I took another slow sip of my scotch. She had no idea that the wheels I just set in motion were already grinding forward. She thought she was going to a party, but she was actually walking straight into her own funeral. When the elevator doors finally slid shut, the silence that flooded back into the penthouse wasn't lonely, it was clarifying. The air cleared instantly. I walked over to the sound system and put on some light jazz, the kind Pamela always complained gave her a headache. You see, tonight wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was the culmination of 6 months of patience. Let me give you a little context so you understand why I didn't chase after her. I met Pamela 5 years ago at a charity gala. She was the breathtaking runway model in the center of the room. I was the industrialist writing the checks to keep the lights on. It was a transaction, even if we pretended it was romance. I provided the lifestyle, the summers in the Hamptons, the unlimited credit lines, the social status, and she provided the beauty. For a while, the deal held up. But depreciation is a real thing, not just in assets, but in character. Over the last year, Pamela had grown bored. Boredom in a person with no hobbies and too much money is a dangerous thing. She started testing my boundaries, making small, cruel comments about my age or my work ethic. She called me boring because I preferred analyzing market trends to partying until 3 a.m. She mistook my quiet nature for weakness. She thought that because I didn't scream back when she started arguments, I was a doormat she could walk all over. She couldn't have been more wrong. I'm a businessman, and in my line of work, you don't react to a problem until you have all the data. That phone call to Peter wasn't a desperate plea for help. Peter isn't just a security guard, he's my chief of security and a former intelligence officer. For the last 90 days, Peter has been my eyes and ears. While Pamela thought she was being sneaky, deleting texts and taking long lunches at hotels, Peter was documenting every single second. I walked back to the window and looked down at the street. I saw her stepping into an Uber Black, likely heading to the Gilded Lily, the club where she planned to parade her infidelity. She thought she was free. She thought tonight was about her having fun and humiliating me. She had no idea that the man she left behind in the penthouse wasn't sulking. I was simply waiting for the trap to snap shut. The audit was complete, and tonight, I was closing the account. Let's shift the scene to where the real drama was unfolding, the Gilded Lily. If you live in New York, you know the place. It's a subterranean playground for the elite, tucked away in the meatpacking district, where the base is heavy enough to rattle your ribcage and a single cocktail costs more than a weekly grocery bill. Pamela thrived in this environment. She loved the smell of expensive perfume mixed with desperation. She swept past the velvet rope without even looking at the bouncer, assuming her face was her ticket. To her credit, heads turned. That green dress was catching the strobe lights, making her look like a shimmering siren. She scanned the VIP section and spotted her targets immediately. Jack and Bruce were sitting at a corner booth, looking exactly like I expected them to. Jack was wearing a suit that was a little too shiny, nursing a drink he probably couldn't afford. He was a mid-tier broker who burned out on Wall Street 5 years ago, constantly chasing the glory days. Then there was Bruce, the fitness instructor, wearing a t-shirt that was 2 sizes too small to show off the only asset he actually owned, his biceps. Pamela walked over to them with a stride that screamed ownership. She slid into the booth between them, feeling absolutely empowered. In her mind, she was the queen holding court, juggling 3 men, the wealthy husband at home paying the bills, and the 2 bad boys here to entertain her. She laughed loudly at something Jack said, making sure the people at the neighboring tables looked over. She was high on her own ego. But because she was so focused on herself, she missed the subtle shift in the atmosphere. Usually, the staff at the Gilded Lily would be swarming our table within seconds, offering hot towels and compliments. Tonight, the waitress walked right past her. The floor manager, a man she had tipped thousands of dollars to over the years, avoided eye contact completely. Pamela, oblivious to the cold shoulder, finally flagged down a passing server with an impatient snap of her fingers. "We're thirsty," she announced, leaning back and crossing her legs. "Bring us a magnum of your vintage Dom Perignon. And keep them coming." The server paused, looking at her with a strange, blank expression. "Well," Pamela demanded, flashing that smirk again. "Don't worry about the price. Just put it on Arthur's tab. He pays for everything anyway." She turned back to Jack and Bruce, winking at them, completely unaware that the safety net she had relied on for 5 years had just been cut. The server returned to the table a few minutes later, but his hands were empty. There was no silver bucket, no crystal flutes, and certainly no vintage champagne. He stood over the table, looking down at Pamela with a polite but firm expression that silenced the group instantly. "I apologize, ma'am," the server said, his voice loud enough to carry over the music to the nearby booths. "We attempted to run the card on file, but the transaction was declined. Pamela actually laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound of disbelief. Declined? That's impossible. It's a Centurion card. It doesn't have a limit. You obviously keyed it in wrong. Go run it again. She waved him away like a fly, but the server didn't move. We tried 3 times, ma'am. The issuer has flagged the card as lost or stolen. It's been deactivated. I can only imagine the color draining from her face. In a desperate attempt to save face in front of her audience, she dug into her tiny clutch and pulled out her personal platinum card, the one linked to a secondary joint account she thought I didn't monitor. She slammed it onto the table. Fine. Use this one. And bring the bottle immediately. This is ridiculous. The server took it, disappeared for 2 minutes, and returned. He slid the card back across the table. Declined. Insufficient funds. The silence at that booth was now heavier than lead. Jack shifted uncomfortably in his seat, suddenly finding the ceiling very interesting. Bruce stopped flexing and started checking his phone. These men were parasites, and parasites know exactly when the host has run dry. The realization hit them before it hit her. The meal ticket was invalid. Pamela was frantic now. She grabbed her phone and dialed my number. Back in the penthouse, I watched my screen light up with her face. I let it ring. 1, 2, 3 times. Then I sent it to voicemail. She didn't know that the call I made earlier wasn't just a single instruction. It was a domino effect. When I said, "Execute Order 66, it signaled Henry, my CFO, to immediately freeze every joint asset, lock every credit line, and flag every account associated with her name for suspicious activity. In the span of 30 minutes, Pamela had gone from being the wife of a multimillionaire to a woman who couldn't even afford a glass of tap water in Manhattan. It's a bank error," she stammered, looking at Jack and Bruce with pleading eyes. "Arthur's bank is always messing things up. I'll sort it out in the morning." But the air had left the balloon. The power she thought she held over these men was evaporating by the second. And just when she thought the night couldn't get any worse, the VIP doors swung open. Just as Pamela was spiraling, frantically checking her banking app and trying to convince her 2 freeloading boyfriends that this was all a big misunderstanding, the energy in the room shifted again. You know that feeling when the music is still playing, but everyone suddenly stops what they're doing to look at the door? That's what happened. The double doors to the VIP entrance didn't just open, they parted like the Red Sea. I walked in. I wasn't wearing the gray business suit Pamela saw me in earlier that evening. I was wearing a bespoke tuxedo, cut sharp enough to draw blood. I looked calm, collected, and completely in control, the exact opposite of the frantic mess my wife had become at table 4. But the real dagger to her ego wasn't my suit, it was the woman on my arm. Walking beside me was Alice. If Pamela was a depreciating asset, Alice was a blue-chip stock. We went to college together, and she is currently one of the most feared corporate litigators in the city. She was wearing a sleek, floor-length black gown that screamed elegance and power, the kind of class Pamela always tried to buy but could never quite afford. Pamela hated Alice. She hated her intelligence, her poise, and the fact that Alice saw right through her from day one. As we stepped onto the floor, the entire club seemed to hold its breath. You see, there was a tiny detail about the Gilded Lily that I never mentioned to Pamela. I don't just frequent this club. Through a silent holding company, I own a majority stake in it. I signed the lease. I approved the renovations. I signed the paychecks. The floor manager, the same man who had just humiliated Pamela by declining her card, rushed over to us immediately. He didn't just greet us, he practically bowed. "Mr. Arthur, Miss Alice," he said, gesturing towards the private balcony. "Your usual table in the owner's box is ready. Can I get you started with the 1942? I nodded, guiding Alice forward. To get to the owner's box, we had to walk directly past the booth where Pamela, Jack, and Bruce were sitting. Pamela stood up, her face a mask of shock and rage. She opened her mouth, probably to scream my name or demand to know what the hell was going on. But I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I didn't even blink. I looked straight ahead, walking past her as if she were a piece of furniture. In that moment, she ceased to exist in my world. I saw the realization hit her eyes. She wasn't the main character of this story anymore. She was just a spectator in mine. I knew Pamela well enough to know that silence was the one thing she couldn't handle. Ignoring her in front of a crowd was worse than slapping her face. As Alice and I settled into the plush velvet seats of the owner's box, overlooking the entire club, I counted down in my head. 3, 2, 1. Right on cue, I heard the commotion on the stairs. Pamela was storming up to the private balcony, her heels clacking aggressively against the metal steps. Usually, security would have stopped her at the bottom, but I had given Peter a specific instruction: let her through. Let her walk right into the lion's den. She burst into the box, chest heaving, face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and fury. Jack and Bruce trailed behind her like lost puppies, looking terrified. They knew who owned this box even if she didn't. "How dare you?" Pamela shrieked, her voice cracking. "You walk right past me? You embarrass me downstairs with those declined cards, and then you sit up here with her." She pointed a shaking finger at Alice, who simply took a sip of her champagne and smiled over the rim of the glass. Pamela turned to her backup. "Jack, Bruce, don't just stand there. Tell him. Tell him that I don't need him. Tell him that I have you too now." I set my drink down on the table with a soft clink. It was the only sound in the room. I looked past Pamela and locked eyes with Jack. "Hello, Jack," I said, my voice conversational. "Did you receive the wire transfer this morning?" Pamela froze. She looked at me, then back at Jack. "Wire transfer? What is he talking about?" Jack wouldn't meet her eyes. He looked at the floor, shuffling his feet. "Yeah, Mr. Arthur. It cleared. My gambling debts are paid off. Thank you." "And you, Bruce?" I asked, turning to the muscle-bound trainer. "Received, sir," Bruce mumbled. "My gym is out of foreclosure. We're good." Pamela looked like she had been struck by lightning. She stepped back, looking between the three men. What is going on?" I leaned forward, clasping my hands together. "You didn't really think these two were pining after you for your personality, did you, Pamela? Jack is a broke gambler. Bruce is a failed business owner. You were an opportunity. But I was a better one." I stood up slowly, towering over her. "They aren't here tonight to date you. They are here because I hired them as independent consultants. Their job was simple: keep you occupied, feed your ego, and document every single act of infidelity for my lawyers. Every text, every photo, every hotel receipt, they sent it all to Peter." I gestured to the two men. "Gentlemen, your contract is fulfilled. You can go." Without a word to Pamela, without even a goodbye, Jack and Bruce turned around and walked out of the box. She was left standing there, in that ridiculous sheer dress, completely and utterly alone. Pamela watched the two men she thought were her conquests disappear down the stairs. She looked back at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and confusion. She opened her mouth to speak, probably to spin some new web of lies, but I raised a hand to stop her. "Save your breath, Pamela," I said, sitting back down. "We are way past the point of excuses. You wanted to know what I was going to do? I told you. I made a call." I nodded to Alice. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a thick, manila envelope. She didn't throw it, she slid it across the table with the precision of an executioner. It stopped right at the edge, inches from Pamela's hand. "Open it," I commanded. Pamela hesitated, her hands trembling, but she opened the clasp. She pulled out the first stack of photos. They weren't just of Jack and Bruce. "That's Willie," I said calmly. "Your 24-year-old tennis coach. You told me those private lessons were improving your backhand. Turns out, they were costing me $500 an hour for something else entirely." Pamela dropped the photos like they were burning her skin. "Arthur," I can explain. I'm not interested in the sex, Pamela. I cut her off. Infidelity gets me a divorce. But what else is in that envelope gets you prison time. She froze. She reached back into the envelope and pulled out a stack of bank statements. Her face went pale white. You see, I continued, Peter didn't just track your location. He tracked the money. For the last 2 years, you've been siphoning funds from the household accounts. Small amounts at first, then larger transfers. You thought you were clever, hiding it under a shell company registered in your maiden name, Ruth. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than a scream. That account under the name Ruth currently holds $200,000 of my money. That's not spousal support. That's embezzlement. That's grand larceny. And the call I made earlier? It wasn't just to security. It was to the district attorney's fraud division. As we speak, they are freezing the Ruth account and issuing a warrant for the assets. She looked at the papers, then at me. The defiance was gone. The smirk was gone. All that was left was the terrifying realization that she hadn't just lost a husband, she had committed a felony, and I had handed the evidence directly to the people who could put her away. You asked me what I would do, I said, taking a sip of my drink. I simply did my due diligence. There is a specific sound that desperation makes. It's high-pitched, jagged, and ugly. When the reality of the embezzlement charge hit Pamela, she didn't cry. She didn't beg for forgiveness. She exploded. You framed me, she screamed, the sound tearing through the VIP box and spilling out over the balcony to the club below. This is a lie. You're trying to ruin me. She lunged toward the table, sweeping her arm across it. The champagne flute, Alice's champagne flute, shattered against the wall. That was the moment the bubble burst. The music in the club seemed to dip, or maybe it was just that everyone nearby stopped dancing to watch the train wreck unfolding in the owner's box. New York high society has a high tolerance for sin, but it has zero tolerance for a scene. I didn't flinch. I didn't stand up. I simply pressed a small button under the lip of the table. You are making a fool of yourself, Pamela, I said quietly. And look around you. The people you were trying to impress tonight? They aren't looking at you with envy anymore. They're looking at you with pity. She spun around, realizing that hundreds of eyes from the dance floor were fixed on her. The woman in the see-through dress screaming like a banshee at the club owner. Before she could throw another tantrum, the heavy velvet curtains at the back of the box parted. Peter stepped in. He wasn't alone, he had 2 large, uniformed security officers with him. Peter didn't look angry. He looked professional, which somehow made it worse. Ma'am, Peter said, his voice deep and rumbling. We're going to have to ask you to leave. Don't touch me, Pamela shrieked, backing away. I am his wife. I own half of this. Actually, Alice spoke up for the first time since the envelope, her voice cutting through the noise like a razor blade. Under the morality clause of the club's bylaws, any member causing a violent disturbance or engaging in criminal activity on the premises forfeits their membership immediately. You aren't an owner, Pamela. You aren't even a guest anymore. You're trespassing. Peter moved forward, blocking Pamela's path to me. He didn't grab her roughly, he didn't drag her out by her hair. That would have given her the victim narrative she craved. Instead, he gestured toward the exit with polite, ironclad firmness. This way, please. Before we have to involve the NYPD. Pamela looked at me one last time, her eyes searching for any sign of the husband who used to fix all her mistakes. I simply turned my chair away from her, presenting my back, and signaled the waiter for a fresh drink. Defeated, she turned and let security escort her out. But they didn't take her out the back way. Peter marched her right down the main staircase, through the crowded dance floor, past the table where she had tried to buy champagne an hour ago. It was the longest walk of shame in Manhattan history. Every eye, every phone camera, was trained on her. She wanted to be the center of attention tonight? Well, I made sure she got her wish. By the time Pamela made it back to our building on the Upper East Side, the adrenaline of the club was gone, replaced by cold, hard panic. She wasn't thinking about saving our marriage anymore. She was thinking about survival. She knew the accounts were frozen, but she also knew what was sitting in her walk-in closet. Roughly $500,000 in designer handbags, jewelry, and watches. If she could just get inside, grab the Birkin bags and the diamond tennis bracelet, she could liquidate them in the morning and run. She rushed past the night doorman, a man named George whom she hadn't bothered to say hello to in 5 years, and practically ran to the elevator. She jammed her finger against the penthouse button. Nothing happened. The button didn't light up. She pressed it again, harder. Still nothing. "It's been locked out, Mrs. Pamela," George said from the front desk, his voice devoid of sympathy. "Electronic access to the penthouse requires a key fob. Yours has been deactivated." Pamela stared at him, her chest heaving. "That is my house. You can't keep me out. I live there." "Actually, the lease is in Mr. Arthur's name," George replied, looking back down at his logbook. "And since you are no longer on the guest list, I can't let you up." She didn't scream this time. She ran. She ran for the service stairs, determined to climb 30 flights if she had to. But when she got to the heavy steel fire door, her code didn't work there either. The keypad flashed a harsh, unforgiving red. Access denied. She collapsed against the door, sliding down to the floor. That's when she saw it. Sitting on the bench in the lobby waiting area wasn't a pile of her clothes. I wasn't going to be that cliché husband who throws his wife's belongings on the lawn. That's messy. I am precise. There was a single, small cardboard box. She crawled over to it and ripped it open. Inside were her essentials, her toothbrush, her face cream, a change of sweatpants, and her passport. Resting on top was a heavy cream-colored envelope with the letterhead of Alice's law firm. She tore it open. It was a copy of the prenuptial agreement we signed 5 years ago, the one she barely read because she was too busy planning the wedding. Alice had highlighted one specific paragraph in neon yellow, the infidelity clause. In the event of proven adultery, the spouse forfeits all claims to alimony, property, and assets. There was a sticky note attached to the bottom, written in Alice's elegant handwriting. "We have the photos. We have the bank transfers. Don't bother hiring a lawyer. You can't afford one." Pamela looked around the empty lobby. She had no home, no money, no friends, and the only clothes she owned were the sheer, revealing dress she was wearing, a dress designed to look good in a club, but that looked pathetic and cold under the harsh fluorescent lights of a lobby she was just kicked out of. 6 months later, the view from my window had changed. I wasn't looking at the frantic skyline of New York City anymore. I was sitting at a small café in the 7th arrondissement of Paris, watching the Eiffel Tower glisten in the morning sun. The air smelled of fresh rain and croissants, not exhaust and expensive cologne. Across the table sat Alice. We weren't talking business today. In fact, since the divorce was finalized last week, a complete victory, thanks to her legal genius, we had stopped talking about cases altogether. We were partners in a new venture now, a tech startup based in Europe. She looked up from her espresso and smiled, a genuine warm smile that Pamela had never been capable of. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a notification from Peter. Even halfway across the world, my security team was still thorough. The message was simple: subject located. File closed. I opened the attachment. It was a grainy photo taken from a distance in a strip mall parking lot in New Jersey. In the picture, a woman was smoking a cigarette by the back door of a discount clothing store. She looked tired. Her hair was dull, pulled back in a messy bun. She was wearing a blue polyester vest with a name tag pinned crookedly to the chest. The name tag didn't say Pamela. It read Jane. To avoid the shame of the scandal and the inquiries about the embezzlement, which I graciously declined to press charges for, on the condition she disappear forever, she had changed her name. The woman who once mocked me for not making enough time for her high-maintenance lifestyle was now folding shirts for minimum wage, living in a studio apartment under an assumed identity. I looked at the photo for a few seconds. I felt Nothing. No anger. No vindication. Just the quiet satisfaction of a ledger that had finally been balanced. She asked me what I would do if she betrayed me. She thought I was weak because I was kind. She forgot that the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one shouting. It's the one who knows the value of everything, including loyalty. I swiped the notification away and deleted the photo. "Everything okay?" Alice asked, noticing me staring at the screen. I put the phone down, screen side down, and picked up my coffee. "Yeah," I said, looking at her. "Just closing an old tab. It's finally paid in full." That's the thing about karma, folks. It doesn't always happen instantly. Sometimes you have to be patient. Sometimes you have to make the plan, execute the order, and let the pieces fall where they may. I lost a wife, yes. But I gained my freedom, my dignity, and a future that is brighter than any neon sign in a New York nightclub. Outro voice, upbeat and engaging. And that is the story of how one phone call destroyed a cheater's life. What do you think? Did Arthur go too far, or did Pamela get exactly what she deserved? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please hit that like button, subscribe to Inspiration Seeker, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Remember, silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes, it's just the calm before the storm. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.